Hello and welcome to the Lift Up Journeys podcast. My name is Katie and I am one of the founding members of Lift Up Women in Life Sciences, a community created to connect, champion and inspire women from academia through to C-suite across the life sciences industry. I'm looking forward to sharing with you an inspiring collection of career stories from a group of wonderful women who work in leadership positions across the life sciences industry. I hope by listening to these stories, you will feel inspired in your own career and gain the skills, confidence, and knowledge you need to climb the career ladder and break through the glass ceiling. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Lift Up Journeys podcast. Today, I'm joined by a truly wonderful lady called Aman Khera. Aman currently works as Vice President of Regulatory Science and Innovation at Worldwide Clinical Trials and has been providing global strategic direction in regulatory affairs for nearly 3 decades now. She's built her career on maintaining fastidious patients and helping clients achieve effective regulatory and development strategies. With a deep foundation in global regulatory affairs in the life sciences industry, Aman looks at how regulatory, strategy, and innovation are intersecting within healthcare. She is a 2021 Pharma Voice 100 honoree, recognized as one of the most influential and inspiring people in the life sciences industry. An advisor, a board member, and a mentor in industry, but most importantly, as a family member of the care circle for a pediatric rare disease patient. Her passion truly extends beyond just her work. As an advisor and a board member and a mentor, she has a real deep interest in how technological innovations continues to disrupt our industry and how regulations, ethics, and compliance will continue to have a loud voice at the healthcare table. Aman consults with companies of all sizes, as well as their funding entities, to support their goals with the primary aim of serving humanity as a whole. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today, Aman. How does that introduction sound to you when you hear it all back now?
Pretty amazing, I have to say. When I sit there, and thank you so much, Katie, for inviting me into this. And I sit there when I read or listen to my bio, because I have to provide it a lot of times, right, to sponsor companies as well. It's it takes me onto a journey of self-reflection, right? Where I came from, where I am, and where I'm going to continue on in this journey as well. So um, I'm hoping this gives, I guess you could say, I'm hoping this gives inspiration to other women
Absolutely,
as
yeah. And
well
that's
this
totally
year.
the goal of what we're here to do at Lift Up Journeys. It's to
Yeah,
inspire others. Your story is definitely a great one, Aman, and one that I think will really resonate for definitely a lot of women across our industry. I'd love to start at the beginning of your career today because I know obviously
absolutely.
you've studied, you've got an undergrad degree. So tell me a little bit about what the younger you was like. What did you study? What did you enjoy?
Absolutely. So I've always had, from a younger age, I've always had that passion for learning and being inquisitive, right? And maybe it started in the UK when they used to have those books as a child. When Tell Me Why. Do you
Yep,
remember? I don't know if you ever
yep,
saw those Tell Me
yep.
Why books, right? So it was like my parents had always bought them, and I'd look, and there was always a scientific field attached to that as well. And I really loved that, I guess you could say. More than anything, like I sat there thinking about what did I want to do as a career, but it was difficult to pinpoint because I loved the legal aspects as well. Maybe I watched far too much LA Law or something like that
Yeah,
when we were younger, or
yeah.
something like, all those legal kind of programs as you're growing up as well. But I loved science, but I also loved business, right? And what I wanted was a grounding as well. So I wanted the scientific background. Clinical biochemistry, medical biochemistry actually sounded like a very good route. And what you might not know, actually, that I don't tell too many people, is that I was very close to not completing a
Oh,
degree,
wow.
by the way. Yeah, so that degree came about because my mentor. It happened to be my maths teacher when I was doing A levels as well. My maths teacher, who happened to be my form tutor, right, in college and sixth form, I'd kind of rolled up and said, I don't need to apply to university because I've got a job lined up in the clinical biochemistry laboratory at the local hospital, and I'm going to study, but I'm also going to take some experience at the same time. She basically said, that's really nice, Aman, but I want you to apply to university. So you have 2 weeks and you will be spending some time completing those applications.
Pushed you straight
And
into
she
it.
goes, push me straight into it. And she goes, before you start saying no to something, you better know what you're saying no
Yeah.
to. Right? So she wanted me, and then she was like, look, there's open days coming over as well at the same time, and I want your draft. I also want you to go to universities and visit them as well while you're choosing and things. And she'd done that quite early on because as soon as I'd started actually the second year during A levels, that woman changed my life. I can't tell you. So it was just that simple spark. And to this day, I remember her, and I just sit there thinking, wow, that is complete. That one decision changed my spark to then continue on to then think about those universities. And she helped me hone in on what do you think, what do you like, and things. She really spent the time to just to kind of help me, guide me. Okay, you're talking about clinical biochemistry. Why aren't you thinking of biochemistry
Yeah.
degrees then? Right? And then she goes, you want to do management as well? And she goes, well, there's a couple of degree courses that are combining biochemistry with management. And then we went into, okay, then now you can think about also doing those sandwich degrees,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Think about getting the experience at the business side. So I've come down to kind of immense
Yeah.
gratitude, right, for that spark, right? So that, continued on with, okay, this is great. I've done clinical, I'm doing medical biochemistry degree. I also got experience like working at actually doing a sensory evaluation unit, a QA department, the compliance unit at Grand Metropolitan Foods that owned Haagen-Dazs, Green Giant,
Yep.
everything like that. So I got that I got that spin on regulations as well, right? And then that just made it so much more easier because I had two different, I guess you could say
Yep.
roles, exposures while I was doing my
Hmm.
degree. I actually got a chance to then hone in on what I wanted to do. And yeah, I guess you could say I did fall into regulatory, but it was also looking at regulatory, and it was right time, right place because the CRO was looking for early early graduates, right, that come out and they were keen to get them into the industry, and it just took off from
Wow.
there. Honestly, it just took off, just continued on, and I do consider myself very lucky in that of course it was right time, right place, but I was armed with my CV. I knew how to talk to people, how to engage them because our university did those training
Oh
courses as
great.
well, to help
Yep.
as well. So by the time I went to an open evening at the CRO, I was armed with copies of my CV, shook everyone's hand, make sure I remember, talk
Yeah.
to them and emailed them
Yeah.
as well. Those kinds of things that I wouldn't have necessarily known at that time, right, to do if I didn't get that exposure and
Yeah.
training
And
as
that's
well.
also the personal side of it, isn't it? That's saying, hey,
Yeah,
here I am as the
completely.
person. I'm really
Yes,
interested. And I love you told
yes,
me the story before about how you fell into regulatory because the CRO had the open day and you had a leaflet and
yeah,
you thought, hang on, what is regulatory? Should I go and find out?
yeah, completely. And I didn't think I was going to get into that because the careers office had told me that you come into it at a
Yeah.
different time.
What was it, Ammon, that caught your eye about regulatory affairs in that CRO?
I think it was finally I saw something that put all my passions, my likes, my wants together. Okay, the legal aspects, regulations, right? getting involved in healthcare, but even the innovation about new treatments and new medicine that is coming in. So, oh, wow, this is just a natural evolution on my
Yeah.
path. Like, this is what I've always kind of thought about, and this is what I want to continue. I want to know more. I want to see this whole regulatory
Yeah.
space for sure. So that really
Yeah,
helped that
that's
bit.
really interesting actually. And obviously for you then securing the job at the CRO, starting
Of
work
course,
in a CRO, what was it like for
yeah.
you coming out of academia and being in that like big wide world of work?
It really helped that I gained that industry experience during my
Yeah,
sandwich degree as such. That really did help because it gave me I guess you could say, I couldn't become, I was very quickly able to pivot out from
yeah,
student mode, right, to
yeah,
professional mode as well. So that really, and I have to say, I even tell my kids, I was like, never underestimate the power of these internships or anything like that, because you're working in parallel, right, with your studying as well, and you're getting to see the world of work, but in a safer
yeah,
place. And that's what it gave me. It gave me that safe place. So my adjustment into purely the professional life was okay, actually. I have to say, didn't come with too many difficulties like that. And don't get me wrong, I was very young, right? And I look back and I think about, okay, I kind of strolled around a little bit and thinking, yeah, that's all I need to do. Just do the tasks that I'm set to do. But I put that down to experience as well. So I'm not going to beat myself up
no,
over that too,
absolutely not.
right?
Yeah, and I think you were with this particular CRO business for a few years or so, weren't you? How did you progress?
Couple of years at the same time, and it gave me a lot of
Yeah,
exposure. It did, right? It gave me a lot of exposure working with different team members. All of a sudden, you're not just answerable to one
yeah,
person as such. There's so many different teams, and added that in, they're not just internal teams or external teams, sponsor companies as well. But then you throw in then talking to your colleagues that are sitting in other
yeah,
places as well, which was very different, I have to say. It was like, okay, we're having telephone conversations. And at that time, I'm really talking about my age here now, by the way, they didn't have video
yeah, yeah,
conferences and
yeah,
things. It was
of course.
teleconferences, right? It was teleconferences, and like, we joke about there's lots of memes out there about teleconferences and things like that, but that was how we got work done. And don't forget, from a regulatory perspective, we were submitting paper
Yes,
copies
yes,
as well,
totally
right?
different to
So
nowadays. Totally.
totally different, completely. I remember the compilation
Yeah,
rooms,
yeah,
right? So, piled up, and the QC that had to happen. And we didn't have automatic page numbering. I'm just going to
gosh, no.
say it was the stamped with the page number. And if you got that wrong, you were going back to the
Yeah,
copy thing. Woe betide if you got that wrong. So it was great
yeah.
exposure. I have to say, I loved it. At the same time, I fell pregnant,
Oh, wow.
right? So like I think I was
Yeah,
married, right? And we decided to start a family
yeah,
as well. So then you have the complication as such, right? In my mind about, okay, I want to do a good job at work, but then I also want to make sure I'm taking care of my
yeah.
child. And at that time, Katie, there was no remote
No,
working
course
from
not.
home
No.
or anything. And there was none of that. So it was hard to balance in my
Yeah,
mind how this would work
yeah,
as well. But look, now I guess you could say, my kids are growing up. I have a 24-year-old as well, right? And I have a 19-year-old and I have a 13-year-old.
wow.
So they are older. And at that time, maternity leave, I think it was 6 weeks paid, and everything else was, yeah, it wasn't that great in the
No.
UK, right? And then people might say, isn't that great in other countries as well, right? I
Yeah,
still see that kind of, okay, maternity leave is kind of sometimes classed as
yeah,
disability leave, right? And it's so they're going, we should have got a little bit better with
yeah,
that now, right? And So it's been, I guess you could say, like through my career, as my career developed, right, and I've moved on and continued, so have my
Yeah,
kids.
of course.
Right? So it's been very much kind of in
Yeah,
tandem for
it's
sure.
great to hear though you were able to continue your career alongside
Yeah.
having a family, because I know of so many other women who find it really difficult
Yes.
to progress, or at least to continue their career. Return to work is
Yes.
obviously such a hot topic at the moment as to how we get more women to
Of
come
course.
back to the workforce. But obviously for you, you must have been determined, thinking, I'm still going to carry on with my career.
I think it's because I loved what I
Yeah,
was doing as well. And that makes it so much more easier because you're like, okay, and it's not so much boxing it into different corners and things and saying, oh, this doesn't work with this. And I had very supportive line management.
yeah,
I did. Like when I was traveling, I would say, look, I'm willing to stay late if I can come in late because I want to drop my
yeah,
child off to school and things. And there were a lot of women that started doing the same
good.
thing in
Yeah,
those companies as well, just to say, look, we are flexible, or you know what, we will start early because we need to leave
yeah,
early, and we will try to have this call earlier on and be flexible. Remember, we weren't running around with Microsoft
yeah,
Teams, right, and everything. It was a lot more
yeah,
difficult then. It was
absolutely.
right, but I think having that support and also showing that you can have that support allowed other women to see they
Yeah,
can do that as well. And I think I remember now in when I was in this is my fourth
yeah,
CRO right now, right? So fourth and final, I would say. And that for me, I've always been that person that wants to say, that has said actually, why can't we work
yeah,
remotely, right? And at that time, working remotely was more for CRAs,
yeah,
for example, right? But then it was like, well, if you can trust CRAs, you should be able to trust other team members from different functions as well. And that really helped, just getting that flexibility, because I remember me personally, and there were other women in the same situation actually. We were going from across London over to outside of London. So M25 was well
yeah,
known, M4, M3, all those kinds of things. Saving that time so we weren't hitting rush hour mean that we spent less time in the car
yeah,
traveling or on public
yeah,
transport. So it's a game changer, but of course it's all talked about now,
yeah,
right? It's increased, although I would like to see it increased more in some
yeah.
companies, right? The company that I work for is extremely flexible, but I still see there needs to be more
Yeah,
flexibility with that, right?
absolutely. And I
So,
think that's how we
yeah,
encourage, particularly women returning to the workforce, whether they've had six
yes,
months maternity or 12 months maternity, or even a
yeah,
couple of years where they've had
yeah,
children in a shorter period of time. And I think
yeah,
there has to be flexibility to encourage that. And you're definitely a great example of someone who was able to facilitate that and kind of say, hey, this is important because I want to work and I want to learn and I love my job. It just
yeah,
has to fit around everything else. So it's great to
yeah.
hear you had the right leadership in place to help you do that. And I
Key,
guess as your
absolutely
career
key.
evolved, Aman, obviously you said you've worked at 4 different CROs now. Talk us through the step you made to leave that first organisation, which I believe was Parexel, and where you went from there.
It was Parexel. Yeah, absolutely. I stayed with Parexel for a couple of years. Then I got headhunted for another CRO. It was a smaller, very niche CRO. It was, and then I always think about it in terms of journeys because I got further away from London, right? So
Okay.
Parexel was in Uxbridge, and I lived in London at the time. So, okay, that was a quicker journey, right? But it was still in traffic and things like that. Then I moved out to
Yeah.
Slough, right, for Orion CRO, I think they merged now, yeah, definitely. And it was a very small niche CRO, and I learned so much because the regulatory department was the head of regulatory affairs and
Oh
me.
wow.
And let me tell you, that was such a fantastic
Yeah.
exposure to basically rolling up my sleeves and doing things. And it wasn't so much about hierarchy and things. We were working together. He was teaching me and showing me my line manager, right? Showing me and just giving me the support. So I do always think about my success has been also down to the supportive environment that I have had as
Yeah.
well. Don't get me wrong. There's sometimes when you don't get those supportive environments, right? But for that I learned so much. Again, after about 3 years, I was headhunted again, right? Into another CRO that was at that time called PRA.
Yeah.
Now that company, again, I'm going to take it in terms of journeys. Right? I went from Slough to now Reading,
Okay, you're
so it's
further
a
and
longer
further out
journey,
of the
right?
centre of London.
Further and further, exactly. So, but it's funny how I always think about it like that. And great line manager. I came in. It was probably then a team of regulatory people of a team of 12, I think, at the time, UK based. Didn't have too many people outside of the UK. But over that course of me staying for 17 years, right, at PRA, where it was a team of 1,500 people, and by the time I left, it was 16,500
Wow.
people. I saw a lot of
Yeah.
growth, right? A lot of changes. And it was there that I got my opportunity to
Wow.
relocate, actually, because it was the chief scientific officer of then PRA that was located in Victoria, over in British Columbia, Canada, where he had hired in many British expats, right, to come and try Victoria for a little
Okay.
while through a work permit, and they were offering full relocations for family members as well. And for us, like by the time, me and my husband had always thought about let's try a different country. We decided to take the
Wow.
jump. And that was us. We sold our house, right? We left all of our family in the UK, right? We had two children. They were what, 5.5, 6, and 18 months at the
Oh,
time,
wow.
right? Yeah, when I think about that now, Katie, I'm like, did we actually do that? Did we do that? Because selling a house is not
No,
easy,
not
right?
at all.
Packing up all your belongings and seeing them, packed away, and they're going to be going across the sea, right? And then setting up in a different country was pretty brave, actually. I'm thinking
It's
about it
very
now,
brave,
right?
but it's brave and it must have paid off because you obviously still live in Canada now, permanent resident, I believe now.
More than permanent residents. So we came in as with work
Yeah.
permits at that time, because PRA were brilliant at like having those relocation services. That translated, they helped us translate that to a permanent
Yeah.
residence, right? Status. It took me, I have to say, it took me purely out. It took me a while. It was only a couple of years ago. We've been here for 17
Oh, wow.
years now, Katie. And in that time, it was only a couple of years ago that we became Canadian citizens.
Ah,
Because we always thought, we're still trying to get
yeah.
out. We're still trying to get out. But then in addition to that, the complication came when every 5 years, you have to renew your permanent residence status. It was akin to a regulatory
Yeah.
application. It was actually quicker to do the citizenship. So the whole family, we have UK and Canadian
Yeah.
passports. And, I guess we were thinking about, do we want to look at a different country? Are we thinking about that? But the I have to say, and for listeners, watchers of this episode, it was probably the most rewarding thing that we did. And we think about it in so many different spaces, not just from the career, but also for
Yeah.
family, because it broadened the scope for our family to look at it, and also allow other family members to think about that too, because one of my sisters also then relocated,
Ah,
right,
wonderful.
to America and things. So and I think about it change, having that experience of going into a new country for however long it is, right? It was more about the growth that comes
Yeah.
from it. And we had to do it ourselves because we had no family
Yeah.
help. We were kind of inserting ourselves into a
Yeah.
different country. And don't get me wrong, there was a really nice British expat community there to help support us and things, but it allowed us to continue the journey. And now I see my children, you know, not so
Yeah.
scared about thinking about moving somewhere to work or traveling more, because that's what
Yeah.
travel does,
Yeah.
right? You know, it broadens your horizons as well. So
Absolutely.
I can't, we have not
Yeah,
regretted it
that's
at
great to
all,
hear. It
those
was, as you
moves.
said, it's a brave decision to make. It is absolutely, but especially when you've got young children, it's a brave decision to make. But I think so often you have to remind yourself, go try it, because you could
Yeah,
experience something, you could learn something. That's where growth could happen. You learn through travel, you learn through different cultures, but it doesn't have to be the forever goal. You can go and
it
try
doesn't
it.
have to be
Yeah,
forever. Absolutely. And that's what we always went in
yeah,
mind with. We're trying it out. And if we don't like it,
yeah.
big deal.
And
We
then
can
you've
go back,
learned actually
right?
that it's maybe not right
And
for
we've
you.
learned.
Yeah,
Yeah, completely. And there's nothing like, I know a lot of people do go back,
yeah,
right? And especially like here from Canada and everything. But guess what? They've gone back and they've broadened their horizons. I speak to friends that have stayed in Canada for like 5 years or 6 years
yeah,
or something, made the change, and then decided, you know what, different priorities, we want to
yeah,
go back. That's okay
yeah,
too. And you can see their
yeah,
growth,
absolutely.
right?
And obviously, at the same time as all of this, your career was developing too, right? You were progressing, so taking on more and more
Absolutely,
responsibility, which was definitely an exciting time for you. And now, obviously,
for
your
sure.
expertise is in regulatory, but innovation is now something that you're starting to move more into. Tell us a little bit more about your love for innovation and how that kind of ties into your passion for regulatory.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. People always think sometimes that people always, I see like innovation. Why are you talking about innovation,
Yeah,
right? And it's because our regulatory landscape is constantly changing. So here we are, clinical research space, for example. We're thinking about how to push forward with new products, new technologies, right? Medical devices and things like that. But then how can you not think with a innovation mindset on top of that, right? That underlie the interwoven aspects, because regulatory agencies are thinking about that. They have their own innovation offices,
yeah,
remember, for companies to come and ask them questions as well. But my job has evolved, like, and the consulting practice we have at Worldwide is to think about all those insights about what's affecting how we are going to present, like how we are going to present to governmental regulators, because we're the regulators are going to speak to
yeah,
regulators, right? Like, so how are we going to present, and how are we going to talk about this technology or certain aspects with the whole system of clinical research is changing without us knowing what's
yeah,
changing as well, right? So that is why it's been a perfect fit with regulatory science. We've got the science part, we've got the regulatory, but now we have to intersect it with the innovation lens. And I think part of it also for me personally comes from the point that I've always been that inquisitive. I've always had that inquisitive
yeah,
nature, and I'm a bit nosy about what's happening in the industry and how it will affect the role I
yeah,
have in regulatory
yeah,
affairs. So because of that, I'm always thinking of the future. So people sometimes say it's a futuristic mindset, different terms and things like that. But I'm not there just to be, and regulators aren't there actually to be providing just that knee-jerk
yeah,
reaction as such. We're trying to think preemptively. We can't think preemptively if we're not looking at what's been going on in the past, but also what's going to happen in the future
yeah,
as well. So that really sparked my interest in all things that kind of can fall under innovation, I guess you could say. So there's lots of things going on in the clinical research industry, the space. We talk like every other industry, we talk about AI tools. We think about, how do we keep it quicker, smarter, faster. I have to, and for me, I've had to continue learning and making sure I'm upskilling as well. And my team is also upskilling to make sure that they are able to give the best current advice to sponsor
Yeah,
companies as well. So it's not a case of just sponsor companies coming in and saying, this is how we're doing it. We want to say, have you thought of this as well? Because this is what's happening in the industry space. It's our job to give the latest insights as well, but to translate them into actionable, to deliver
yeah,
them out, I guess you
yeah,
could say.
totally.
Right? So innovation is just, and it really helps me think about that when I'm thinking about the technological advances that are going on, what could impact the industry. And rather than me saying, I'm going to bury my head in the sand and let it disappear, I guess you could say more so, I want to think about, do I need to consider being an early adopter or fast follower rather than a person that's kind of sitting there not thinking
Yeah,
about this and constantly trying to disrupt
yeah.
myself, right? I guess that's the kind of mindset that
Yeah,
I've had.
that's really interesting to hear how you say it's a mindset for you.
Yeah,
Obviously, our industry goes through tremendous innovation, tremendous growth. We're probably one of the fastest moving industries out there.
yes.
In your opinion, Aman, what sort of trends are you expecting for regulatory affairs in the future?
I think I love getting my crystal ball out, I have to say, for a start in regulatory, right? I think, and it's a welcome, it is. I The trends are now going to be like, look, technological advances, fantastic, right? They're going to have some limits put on them as well, rightly so, because we are not talking about a product that doesn't impact
Yeah,
people, right? So the biases, the algorithms, and things like that, our agencies are already thinking
yeah,
about that, which is fantastic. You know, Industry need to think about that. The other aspect is also putting people's voices in a healthcare front and center. For such a while, we've talked about patient centricity, and I personally don't like that term because I have yet to understand what that term means, because that can be a very kind of umbrella term, but we're not getting into the journey of the patients, and that's what regulatory agencies are now doing. So this is very welcome. So perhaps I could say the scope has broadened for regulatory affairs, that not only are we submitting scientific documents, solid scientific documents, but we're asking other stakeholders to give input for us so that we can share that
yeah,
patient voice, right? And that's been the most welcome. I guess you could say, I know you've asked me, what could be, what we should be looking for. I'm shaping it into what should we be
yeah,
looking for as
yeah,
well, right? Because as a person that has a voice in the healthcare space in regulatory affairs, that's what I want to
yeah,
see as well. And the agency regulators are thinking the same
yeah,
thing as well.
totally.
So tech advances, fantastic, cautiously optimistic about them. But, and I say, before you make a decision, like it's not just a blase, umbrella conversation opinion that you have, because AI tools are developed very, like, specifically for different problems. What we have to get into in regulatory affairs, is it helping or is it
Yeah,
hindering as such? And then I need to communicate that to an
yeah.
agency as well.
Yeah, it's totally amazing to hear your insights, Aman. To think of your journey from where you started, kind of just trying regulatory affairs, sounds like something that might pull on my expertise, to everything you've learned now as you were sharing these trends that we're going to see hopefully in the future, the way we adopt the agencies, the correspondence. It's amazing to hear your journey, and for you professionally as well. Obviously, you've been promoted within your businesses, you've reached new levels of
Yes.
responsibility. Am I right in thinking you've been in a leadership position? You've also been an individual contributor before. Tell us about how you've
Uh,
fitted into both those.
Absolutely, absolutely. So earlier on in my careers, like in other CROs, right, I have climbed up the ladder, right, as a like eventually you get to leading a team, right? Starts with a small team, grows into a large team, and what have you. When I first joined Worldwide, I came in as an individual contributor. And I have to say that was probably the biggest career growth for me for such a long time. And don't get me wrong, I was, at PRA 17 years. I was not doing the same job for 17 years. I was switching roles every couple of years and things like that, doing different things. But here, then, to come in as an individual contributor in the scientific solutions team, like a senior advisory team with everyone's got their own specialisms and expertise and things like that, was really powerful
Yeah.
for me, I have to say, because now I have a challenge that I do not have the authority,
Yeah.
right? I don't have the authority, right? And now I have to use my skills of persuasion as well. In addition, not only is it, okay, this is what I'm leading and, everyone else, needs to action that. I now needed to sell
Yeah.
visions, right? As well, without authority, right? So I really had to hone in on my collaborative
Yeah.
skills as well, even my communication skills, to think about how, how can I invoke, I guess you could say, sell what I'm trying to sell, my vision, my initiative that I might want to do. It was great, as in it reinforced my regulatory
Yeah.
experience for sure. It's always been that, because I never want to leave that solid foundation of regulatory, but to become that individual contributor, I had to learn and reinforce more further
Yeah.
skills. I would recommend it to so many people, like just to get that stint of an individual contributor role. Because for me, I thought I knew what I was doing, having led teams, managing teams, and things like that. But that personal mindset shifted me in such a way that when I have now, like, gone back to being a leader, right? Have team members because we're setting up a consulting arm, I'm thinking of it in a very different
Yeah.
way now. So I've kind of combined the skills that I had, reinforced them, of course, but constantly learning. But now I see there's more efficiency with what I'm trying
Yeah.
to do as well. Because, having that individual contributor role has allowed me to think about how I communicate to people as well, and how I present initiatives to people, and how we make sure that we're working together. So it was, I guess you could say it was a bit of a challenge because, like I said, that individual contributor role, you really don't have any
Yeah.
power,
Yeah,
right?
and it's a
As
learning,
such.
isn't it? It's a real learning curve because I think we
Very.
we all set off in our career with a clear
Yeah.
trajectory in mind. So I'm going to be an individual
Yeah.
contributor, then lead a small team, lead a big team,
Yeah.
lead a department, and then really work myself up that way. But actually, that's kind
Yeah.
of not what a lot of leaders have done in our industry. I think you learn more
No.
from trying
Yeah.
different things, don't you?
Completely. And this is what I love, the environment that I have, right? Here at Worldwide, in scientific solutions team, right? Working with so many different subject matter experts, bringing my regulatory lens in, and now formalizing that into, what we do more, even though our name is Worldwide Clinical
Yeah.
Trials, right? We do more than clinical trials, because here we are thinking about, we're helping sponsor companies think about, before you start a clinical trial, what you should be doing with a regulatory agency during the clinical trial, and what's the
Yeah.
next steps. So that has all those experiences have culminated in me being able to say, look, this is a great offering that we can give, even though our name says we're all about clinical
Yeah.
trials, right? But we want to help sponsor companies with the overall
Yeah.
development, right? And for me, that has also been bringing in the right team members, right, to enhance that offering as well, and to really think about how I can coach, mentor. And this is a great thing, by the way. the department is not very
Yeah.
hierarchical, right? And so I will roll up my sleeves just like my team member will, right? It doesn't matter about that because we're there to help. So that is a far smaller team in a CRO than like the clinical regulatory affairs
Yeah.
group that, are very process driven, need to get submissions done. So this has allowed me, and I say this for other listeners, your pathway is not always
Yeah.
upwards, right? You can kind of take a step sideways and have a look, and then you can, if you're keen to continue upwards, you can form your own
Yeah.
pathway
Yeah,
as
I
well.
I love that analogy because I think
Right?
it's so important to know what's going on sideways to get a
Yeah,
feel for
yeah,
what other colleagues are facing, their challenges, how you can work together,
yeah,
because that will really cement you with a wider business understanding. So
of
I'm
course.
really pleased to hear that you're getting that in your current role now, and it sounds really exciting for you personally. Wanted to kind of finish up and hear maybe what your future
Sure.
goals, what your future ambitions are, and where do you see yourself going from here?
Oh, I will never, I think because I learned so early on, never say no immediately, right? I'm always looking at the industry space, and I have completely, I guess you could say, from my personal inquisitive learning, because someone had asked me actually, what's the best investment you can make? And I think they were talking in the financial sense, right? But I answered that with
Yeah.
yourself, right? So thinking about, I think it's more open to opportunities, and I have some great growth opportunities here at Worldwide, and I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to them. I also look at technological advances as well, because there's a lot of tech companies out there that have some great ideas. And that's why I've been really lucky to get involved in like sitting on the advisory boards and things like that, lending my regulatory
Yeah.
lens to what is going on in the
Yeah.
space as well. Because otherwise, tech companies have a danger of coming in, thinking it's the same thing over and over again, that we'll keep on trying, we'll hit that ball against the wall, and we'll just keep on trying that. You can't do that with
Yeah.
patients, right? You can't do that. So lending that lens. So I continue to be an advocate for patients first, right? And I speak from that from a very personal sense because, of our experience in like my family and things like that, my extended family, I mean, a caregiver circle. It's really flipped my mindset again. And I say mindset simply because I thought I knew what I was doing, and I thought I was doing the great things for patients. I cannot tell you how that
Yeah.
lens, I'm adding it into every single deliverable that I give, or every single conversation that I have with the sponsor
Yeah.
company, asking them, prompting them, telling them we can help. So I don't know what the future holds, I'll be honest, but all I know is that I'm always open to new possibilities because I myself am always driving the new
Yeah, I
possibilities as
love that.
well, right?
Yeah, it's a great mindset to have, Aman, and thank you for sharing that because I know that
Thank
mindset
you.
will resonate for a lot of listeners, and I think that's where the growth can really come. I was going to have one final question for you, as I'm
Sure.
just curious to get maybe some of the advice you would give, maybe your younger self now, if you were to look back.
Yeah.
So if listeners are maybe new in their career, maybe they're in a CRO or in their first role in the industry, what would you tell someone? What would you tell the younger Aman now with everything that you've learned?
That's a really interesting question, that is. I would probably speak to, don't worry about what other people are doing, right? Forge your own pathway, right? Never dim your own light, right? And that is really important because I did have a blip for a few years where I was so worried about, it was a conversation that I had with a person in the company I'd worked for previously, that different times, I guess you could say, that said, I mean, you work really well. Sponsors love you, and you write really eloquently. You speak really eloquently. Hide your profile picture, no, just to make it better. So I'm using that as an example, right? A very firm example. Don't dim your
Yeah,
light, because what I did, I actually listened to that advice, right? And got worried. So for a good few years, I was so worried about what other people were thinking, I forgot to continue on with the work I needed to do on
Yeah.
myself, right? On myself. So it's always been, I guess, for me, a case of reminding myself, right? Thinking about how I can improve myself, and thinking more and more about also taking care of all the different realms. So for me personally, thinking about what lesson would I say to Aman? Um, I would say, don't forget about all the realms that you really want to concentrate on. Your your mental well-being, right? Your physical well-being. And for me personally, there is a spiritual
Yeah.
well-being as well. If that is in balance for me, then I can be the best person at that time. And and so mistakes happen, but guess what? Like even rejection happens, and I know people say rejection is redirection. I truly believe in
Yeah.
that too. Like this thing, if you're not in the right environment and you're not being able to grow, you are in charge of changing that for
Yeah.
yourself, right? And I wish someone had
Yeah.
told me that earlier
Yeah.
on as
And
well.
don't dim your light,
So
because
yeah,
you
don't
have
dim
to
your
be
light.
authentic.
Yeah,
You have to be true to yourself.
yeah. I made myself
Yeah.
smaller, right? And because of making myself smaller, it was a disservice to what I could
Yeah.
do as well, right? It wasn't so much about, and it wasn't even talking about I'm not even talking about career pathways
Yeah.
as such. I'm talking about I stopped believing in
Yeah.
myself. I think that's you, and it's not a case of like, okay, people will say self confidence is one thing, but you need to be thinking about yourself and believing in yourself, but also questioning yourself as
Yeah.
well, right? So it's that kind of path to understanding. I guess it's self discovery,
Absolutely.
right?
And that's a
That
continued
discovery,
journey,
yeah,
isn't it? That's something that will go on
completely,
throughout your career. And yeah, I love it. I
of
love the
course,
advice. I mean, I think it's great. I think it will resonate for a lot of people, that we need to really focus on ourselves and supporting ourselves and flying the flag for
yeah.
us, because we know what we want more than anything. And you have to be your biggest cheerleader, don't you?
Yeah, before you are able to, support
Yeah.
other women, for
Yeah.
example, you have to be thinking about, okay, it's not just talking it, it's actually walking
Yeah.
it, right?
Absolutely.
And being that role model for yourself because you didn't
Yeah.
have it for yourself,
Absolutely. Well,
right?
thank you, Aman, for sharing your story
Thank
today. It's
you.
been so lovely to hear how you've progressed and everything you've learned along the way. And you should really, really be proud of yourself for the journey that you've been on. And we're really grateful to have you being so open and honest with us
Thank
today. So
you.
thank you very much for joining us.